Welcome to this XpoNorth conference session, which relates to landscape and sense of place. I'm Raoul Curtis-Machin, the operations manager at Culloden Battlefield in the Scottish Highlands, and I'm the host for this session. Who possesses this landscape? The man who bought it, or I who am possessed by it? This is an extract from Norman McCaig's poem, A Man in Assynt, which explores the philosophical contrast between the ageless intractability of ancient landscapes and the notion of human ownership, which could last for a single brief lifetime. But it's not just ownership which poses a challenge to us. It's also how we manage some of our wild, beautiful, and often fragile landscapes. The COVID pandemic has forced many of us to stop for a second and reflect on just how we live, where we live, and why. This session brings together a fantastic group of speakers, each with a particular relationship with a geographic area. They will each make a brief presentation, and then as a panel, we'll discuss how we strike an often complex balance between the well-being, sustainability, the environment, and the needs of the communities in and around these landscapes. How we balance the desire of the wider population to access these places that inspire and refresh them. We will hopefully offer insight into the range of new opportunities technology and innovation bring, and how creative thinking can drive sensitive and stable progress. So, to our first speaker, Jean-Philippe Messier, founder and general manager of the Réserve mondiale de la biosphere Manicouagan-Wapishka in southern Quebec, Canada. Jean-Philippe set up an organization mandated with a UNESCO designation, the result of a broad consultation of key players in the Manicouagan, mobilized behind the objective of positioning the region within the world network of biosphere reserves. Today, with more than 700 sites in nearly 130 countries, this network brings together a wide variety of entities. Over the years, the reserve has become a major agent of change in its region and a benchmark within its operation. To achieve this and deploy the full leeway required to accomplish its mission, Jean-Philippe notably led the organization's shift towards a business model based on the principles of social economy and territorial entrepreneurship. Today, its activities are deployed within 3 business units which he leads, and a mechanism for the reinvestment of autonomous revenues as levers for the deployment of numerous projects in this UNESCO designated territory. Over to you, Jean-Philippe.
Thanks very much, Raoul. Ou merci beaucoup en français. Ton français est très bon en passant. Your French is very good. When you say Réserve mondiale de la biosphère. Thanks everybody for sharing this session with us, to be here and listening. Yes, I'm Jean-Philippe Messier. I'm talking to you from Wapishka, Manicouagan-Wapishka Biosphere Reserve. This is located in Quebec's province, Canada. It is, for the people who knows around Quebec, about 5 hours drive from our capital city, northeast. So it's what we would call a rural area. This is a northern place in the mindset of most in Quebec. And I have to say that we do share a lot of the same concerns, challenges, opportunities, as well as the people will speak right after me. So Manicouagan-Wapishka is, as it was said in the introduction, designated as a biosphere reserve. So what does that mean for the people maybe not aware of that designation? It is from UNESCO. It is one of the major programs of UNESCO that can designate some areas, but it is an initiative of the local people here who request that designation from UNESCO, and it's not the other way around. So it is a process that the local people initiates. There's of course a lot in Europe. There's a couple in Scotland. We work with one in particular, which is Westeros, by the way. We'll talk about that. But what does it mean to be a biosphere reserve? It first levels up the level of expectations in terms of, you've said it, well-being, sustainability, everything that we will be actually talking today. And for a place like Manicouagan, what's special about it, and you need to know that Manicouagan Biosphere Reserve is about 2/3 of the size of Scotland as a whole. It is a massive territory with about 30,000 people living here. So when we say this in the context of Europe, usually there's some electric shortcuts happening. There's a lot of land. There's a lot of place here. So a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve for us is as well something about the place and a sense of belonging to the place. And we talk about sustainability. We will address those topics later on in the discussion. To be sustainable for us means to have a good sense of place and to make sure that people are living here and participating actively in this in the dynamic. So within this huge territory and strong of this designation, as it was said, we developed a very special approach as a biosphere reserve that we call territorial entrepreneurship. So I see biosphere reserve as territorial entrepreneurs, people and organizations that are active, that participate, that brings initiatives, that are starting projects and so on. So we do participate in the regional development with all the stakeholders you can imagine. And we do this through 3 business units. Yes, one that advise, so we have a consultant company, one that welcome people, so we have a tourism company, and one that contributes to the region through a foundation, and so a non-for-profit organization that redistributes the surpluses from the 2 other business units within projects with schools, people, consultation, and all kinds of sustainable initiatives. And so this is a very special approach that is, I would say, special to us, but in some ways spreading around in the network. And as we will be addressing innovation, technology, and so on, I'll be bringing my ideas on organizational innovation and how to be creative and how to tackle with this context of COVID that brings new opportunities as well as challenges, of course. But we need to address this as organizations that we represent. So we do this as biosphere reserves, we do this as units. So here, Manicouagan, we have our challenges and we are trying to find our ways of transitioning with this context of finding ways through this. But we do this as a network as well. So there's a big network, over 700 different sites all over the world. And as we were saying, we do have partnership with Westeros, which you might know. It's a famous area in Scotland. And we are discussing about this territorial approach and how do we manage, how do we address our challenges. Tourism, for instance, that is very important in Westeros, very important in some areas of Manicouagan as well, and how can we help each other and so on. So there is a very dynamic approach to this network that is allowing us to not only address things locally, but to extract from the network the best approach. And this is what is so inspiring about this panel today. And how you guys are, Denis and Murray, addressing your own challenges that are in some ways similar or different from Manicouagan's one. So that gives you a quick insight of where I'm from, how do we work, and how do we address things. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jean-Philippe, brother. I'm going to move straight on. I'm just going to keep time tight because the most important bit here is our conversation afterwards. So Denis Holm, until the end of last year, Denis was the mayor of the municipality of Vagur, which has got a population of approximately 1,400 on Suðuroy, the southernmost of the Faroe Islands, which lie between Iceland and Norway. Denis is currently the senior lecturer in the University of the Faroe Islands. During his period as mayor, he was also head of the board of the Faroese Municipal Organization. He worked as a researcher at the Research Centre for Social Development and the Independent Research Centre within the Social Sciences, which merged with the University of the Faroe Islands in 2008. He also served as the director of the Research Centre from 2005 to 2012. After 8 years as a mayor in municipal politics, he is now back at the Department of History and Social Science at the University of the Faroe Islands. Denis, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just share my screen so you can get some idea of where we are. Yeah, I'm going to continue where Jean-Philippe left and talk about transition, but compared to Canada, we are a really small place, and I'm going to talk a bit about this case of Vagur. Is the town where I'm staying that has been changed from living within the fisheries of the sea, and now we are trying to living off the landscape. As mentioned, we are situated in the midst of the North Atlantic, between Iceland, Scotland, and Norway, and we have a plane connection, of course, to Denmark, Norway, Iceland, and also to the UK under normal circumstances. But with the corona and everything is really difficult today, as you may know. If you look at the Faroe Islands, we are 18 islands with a population of something like 54,000, and here on Surøy we are just below 5,000, and with the town of Vagur we are 1,400. So we are in some ways in a periphery of the periphery, if you can put in that term, here on Surøy. If you look at the Faroe Islands in general, and you look at the history in the Faroe Islands, we have mainly been a fisheries economy, lived off fisheries for several centuries, and we still live off fisheries, a very important part of our national economy. But for the last decades, the number of people that have been working within the fisheries have been declining. And here locally in the town of Vagur, we have really been in a transitional period, a difficult period, where we have had maybe 250 to 300 jobs within the fisheries in 2010, and we lost most of them. I think we have something like 10 left today. So our foundation of economy was really disrupted by this change in local fisheries. So we really had to do something when I started as mayor in 2013, and we started to focus on new ways to establish an economy for our local community. And we focused on the experience economy, which is really a broad term, but I will just shortly talk about how we use local nature and landscape as an important foundation for that. And you can see we have a lot of nature and landscape that is really impressive. We have focused on tourism. I'll talk shortly about that. And we also have been focusing on sports, establishing a sports and adventure high school. And in both cases, the local nature and the landscape are important foundation for those paths that we have chosen to walk. If we look at tourism, we had the landscape earlier, also when we were a fisheries community, but I don't think we thought about it as a business opportunity so much. But when we needed to think about it as a business opportunity, we started to do that. And we focused from 2013 onwards to create the infrastructure to create the possibilities for tourists to come, with a focus on creating more beds. And that happened really fast and good. And we got a huge increase in the number of beds in a very short period, and we got a lot of tourists coming in now. And with the increasing number of tourists, we also got new businesses, hotel, bed and breakfast, cafes, restaurants, tour operators, service companies, and so on. And we've been able to create new jobs based on the tourist sector, based on the nature and landscape as a main attraction. That has been really positive for us. And the sports and adventure high school is also based mainly as using the local nature and landscape as a playground. We got youngsters coming in from all over the Faroe Islands and also from abroad. Approximately 50% of them come from abroad, and we have some 48 students coming in each semester. And these are also creating new jobs. And the positive side is that we are attracting people that have went abroad, left the town and the community and to get an education. They are now moving back with their university education and working locally. So this has been a really important part of our local transition, that we have used the nature and the landscape to change the way the business cycle of the community has been. If you look at the Faroe Islands in general, we have been campaigning for the last 10 years. The public company Visit Faroe Islands, campaigning that Faroe Islands should be your next destination, and the main focus has been on nature and landscape, the Faroe Islands being unspoiled, unexplored, unbelievable. And they have had a huge success in attracting new tourists or new visitors, and we have had a doubling in the number of visitors coming in each year. But being a very small place and a very small society and small nature, also we are experiencing that there are maybe 4 or 5 sites that are extremely much visited. and these are for the same reason really vulnerable. And we can see it in the photo here to the right, that the landscape is really had a negative impact on the landscape with soil erosion and so on. And we also have had bird habitats that are put under huge pressure because of a lot of people just coming in. So just to sum up, then we are in a situation where we are walking a difficult path. I think it's a really balanced walk you need to think about. Locally, we've been able so far, I must say so far, to adjust to the increased use of nature and landscape, and have mainly been looking at the positive side with creating new businesses and new jobs at the same time, and making a positive way for this local community. But in the Faroe Islands in general, we are facing difficulties in several places, and there's really a discussion going on now with the legal framework about the use of nature and landscape. Should it be just for everyone to walk in the nature and landscape, or should it just be for the Faroe Islanders in general? So it's a really difficult discussion, because for somebody it's a business, and for others it's all about preservation and protecting the landscape and the nature against too many visitors, against too many tourists. So we are in a situation where we are balancing this walk that you of course know about also in both Canada and Scotland as well. Yeah, that was my short presentation of what we are doing and who we are.
And Denis, how do you say, is that thank you?
That's tack for det, thank you.
Tack för det, thank you. That's fascinating. I think we are going to have a lot of the same common challenges. We go from the size of Canada to the size of the Faroe Islands to back to Scotland again. So thank you, Denis. Our third speaker is Murray Ferguson, Director of Planning and Place for the Cairngorm National Park Authority. Murray has worked on the collaborative management of the Cairngorm area for more than 20 years, and currently oversees the National Park Authority's work on planning, rural development, sustainable tourism, visitor services, and community development. He's especially interested in the management of protected areas that are based on people and place, and how both can thrive together. Murray is a science graduate in geography with 2 postgraduate degrees, a master's in rural resources planning and a master's in business administration. He's also worked for non-governmental organizations elsewhere in Scotland and in South America. So Murray, over to you.
Okay, well, thank you for the invitation to speak at this event. I'm very pleased to be speaking to you about the Cairngorm National Park from Scotland, and I work for the National Park Authority, which is the government agency responsible for the overall management of the park. This is a slightly unusual map of Europe, and I'm sorry, Denis, it's just missed off the Faroe Islands, but I hope you can see Scotland, part of the UK, but with a much less population, and the big red dot more or less shows you where Cairngorm National Park is. We have a big national park where there are 15 national parks in the UK, and our national park is about 4,500 kilometres square, 1,750 miles square, about 6% of rural Scotland. But you can see there it's a relatively unpopulated area. The landscape is dominated by mountains, not very peaky mountains, but they're some of the highest mountains in Scotland, up to about 1,300 metres. And around those mountains, we've got quite extensive forest cover and the best remnants of the original Scottish forest, which once was much more extensive, made up of Scots pine. Now, in terms of why the area is special, we do receive a lot of visitors, about 1.9 million visitors a year. And we do surveys every few years, and we know pretty confidently that people come to this area because of the landscape, the scenery, the countryside, the landscape. They want to walk in it, they like the peace and quiet, and they like sightseeing. So all of those top reasons there are fundamentally to do with people's appreciation of landscape. As you were suggesting in your areas, there are hot spots, and it can get pretty busy on a good day when the sun is out in Scotland. It does come out, but this is the same view from the same day last year, when, of course, because of COVID, we were in complete lockdown and there were no visitors around, which was a shock to all of us. In terms of who owns the land, we're a national park, but we're not a typical national park, certainly from a North American perspective. The land is owned, about 75% of the land area is owned privately, and the remainder is either owned by different government bodies or by large conservation charities like the National Trust for Scotland. But very importantly, people do have rights to access the land. So we've got very progressive access rights, which means people can access the land on bike or on foot, almost the whole landscape, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, as long as they behave responsibly. And that concept of responsibility applies to the users, but also to the land managers. And we have a book of about 140 pages that sets out in very much detail how to behave responsibly. So I'm sure we'll come back to that. The National Park was set up in 2003, and we have 4 aims. Conservation, recreation, enjoyment, and sustainable use are fairly typical for all national parks around the world. But the 2 Scottish national parks have got this unique aim to also be about economic and social development of the area's communities. And the legislation tells us that we must, if the aims are in conflict, we must give greater weight to the conservation aim. To do that, we've got a board of a management board made up of 19 people, and they come from a mixture of places. 7 are nationally appointed because of their expertise. 7 are nominated by 5 of the local authorities that surround the mountains. And very innovatively, there is a special election system that allows the local people who live in the park, there are 18,000 people, to directly elect people onto our board. And that's to try and get the balance right between local people and national interests. In terms of how we do our work, we write quite a lot of plans and strategies, and the overarching plan for the park is the National Park Partnership Plan. And then we manipulate a balance of incentives and rules and regulations to try and get the best for the area. And I can say more about that in the discussion. In terms of who we work with, we have a whole number of advisory groups and advisory forums. And at the moment, we're trying to work very hard with young people. We led work within Europe with other neighbouring countries for a youth manifesto. And this was trying to work with young people across Europe who, in protected areas, who very often got similar concerns about jobs, about housing, about transport in rural areas, and trying to have a very positive agenda. And I thought I'd just illustrate 1 or 2 of the projects we've worked on recently that are relevant to our topic. One of our very enterprising staff in his own time developed a landscape map of the whole park using Minecraft. And we've used that to engage young people in some really interesting discussions about planning and how the planning system works. We let them loose in this virtual landscape and they built their own settlements, their own communities. But of course, we could rub it all out and start again, which was good. Very good way to engage people digitally. Out on the ground, we've been very keen to develop a network of volunteer rangers who are doing practical work out on the ground, helping the employees to look after the park. And in a particular part of the park called Badenoch, which means the flooded lands, and I think from the photograph there you can see why it's called that. It very frequently floods. There is a very rich historic and cultural heritage in the area, and we've had a 3-year partnership project there, helping local people understand more about this heritage and also to exploit it sensitively to visit and present it well to visitors, because it's one of the quieter areas of the park where its story deserves to be told much more. Our branding proposition is all about stories and the land, so Badenoch, the story lands. And lastly, we're working at the moment, I mean, the whole area, the whole country has been very seriously impacted by COVID. So we're working at the moment on a green recovery fund. And just yesterday we were telling people that they had been successful with their grant applications for a £300,000 fund, which is funding a whole lot of community projects. Some of them are about broadband delivery, some of them are about community facilities, some of them are about nature and wildlife. And it was great to be able to hand out that money and get these projects started on the ground. That's a quick overview, and I'll look forward to the panel discussion.
Fantastic, thank you, Murray. Three great presentations, three very contrasting places, and I think we're going to have an interesting conversation about the challenges that we're all facing. What I'll do is I'll do a series of questions, but we can go off piste and talk around them. I'll come to each of you in turn, so if you can all switch your microphones off, that would be great. And if you've got anything else that you want to add, just stick a finger up, and I'll keep an eye for it. I can't guarantee I'm going to spot the hands, but I'll try my best. So we're going to kick off with, how do we encourage young people to stay, live and work in our landscapes? And I'm going to come to Denis first on that one, please.
Yeah, if you look at what's happening in the Faroes, I think maybe in the most of the western part of the world is that young people today are encouraged to get an education. We also see that typically in the Faroes, and what we've been seeing here in the Faroes, also in rural areas and remote areas in Scandinavia in general, is that people get an education, and typically if you come from a community that has been based on a natural economy, be it fisheries, forest, or farming and so on, it's really difficult for them to come back if they don't have a job opportunity. So what we have been focused on locally, and I think we have had a success in that here on Suðuroy in the Faroe Islands, and we can see that a lot of communities are adopting our way of doing it also abroad. We have been giving lectures both to this Highland and Island enterprise and also in Iceland and Scotland, in Norway and Sweden, is that this focus on working with people that come in. It's much more fun to work with people and get a smile and get a nod and get a conversation than working with a fish. If you cut a fish really nice, it doesn't smile at you and say that was really good. But if you are working with people, you get some kind of a feedback of what you're delivering. So we see that these youngsters that are coming back with higher education, they are starting their own businesses within cafes, restaurants, and tourist operations and so on. And their main idea of coming back is that they want to be part of this way of dealing with a new modern community that is maybe almost a global community, because we get people from all over the world visiting us. So I think that's maybe a path of how you can do this.
Great, Jean-Philippe.
Yes, thank you, Raoul. Very interesting, and as we're saying, we do share those same challenges. For us, how do we attract and keep youth in our region is a massive challenge. We have a huge youth exodus out of the region. They go, as you were saying, Denis, they go out for their education, and which we hope they will, because there's no university in our region. So in some way we hope they leave, and in another way we hope they stay. So this is something to think about, and the only way, because if they grow up here, people, I mean, there's two things: people from here, and then people that grew somewhere else and came back, but could come back. But about the people that are born here. We need to develop what we were talking about earlier, that sense of place, the root feeling attached to this place, to this land. And what do we have in special is the landscape. This is what your presentation, and thanks for the images. I have regrets now not to have shared images of my place, but it's pretty similar. So what we have is landscape, and in some way, we do have this landscape, and pre-COVID, as you are saying, we needed to find good jobs on top of it for those youth to come. But COVID had changed something, and now you can work remotely for an organization that is somewhere else and still come back and live here. So that is increasing the value of landscape in some way. And so it is quite a change, and we do observe organization that are or a movement of people that they want to live in a place like here, but in many ways, because of the job amounts and so on, work for an organization that is somewhere else in greater centers, for instance, and go there once in a while. So it is a huge, if we want to be sustainable as regions, the three of us, the four of us, we need to have a reflection on this. How do we attract and maintain our youth capital, if I can say it like this? Thank you.
For sure. Thank you. Murray, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, yes, we have many of the same issues, although I think we've been slightly more successful than some other parts of Scotland in terms of stemming the youth exodus. And that's because we are relatively well connected to the centres of population. And we are fortunate that the tourism economy is up until COVID, is pretty vibrant, and there are opportunities for younger people to become involved, particularly in tourism. But it's something that I think needs constant focus, and we're working quite hard to try and make sure that young people, they're given opportunities to become involved in our management structures, our advisory committees, that we've got good training projects. We've just been funding a new training project that will encourage people to develop land-based skills, and that we're trying all the time to improve the digital connectivity, because there's no doubt the COVID period has shown us that if we can get people working in rural areas, you can do amazing jobs, even from quite a remote area, if you have the right connectivity.
And so we're touching on technology and the movement and young people and attracting young people into an area, but can that also present a challenge in terms of a young family growing up in a lot of these rural areas would probably rely on land-based skills, as you say, so you need to enable that to happen. But if you're getting incomers coming in who may be quite highly skilled and they might have a digital connection, is there a bit of balancing to do to make sure that houses stay affordable, for example, and that lifestyle expectations are kind of matched for those who've been born and brought up and haven't moved, and those that come in? Murray, have you come across that at all?
Oh, absolutely. On a day-to-day basis, yes. I mean, the issue of housing supply is very difficult, and we are the planning authority, so we decide how much land housing can be built on, and some people think we should be allowing much more land for houses to be built on, and other people say, no, though, this is a national park, a protected area, therefore you should be even more restrictive. But of course, that has consequences for the supply of housing. One of the things that I think we all recognise we need to do is to make sure that the housing that is built, because we are still expanding the housing supply a bit, is constrained so that it's available to the people that are living and working in the area. It's too easy at the moment for it to go into tourism or short-term accommodation, and that's something we need to control more.
Right, so you'd bring in control measures. Jean-Philippe, have you guys got a similar approach, or do you do things differently?
Yeah, but we do have the same challenges, and as I was saying, the biosphere reserve or the region is very large, so it could be addressed very differently depending of where you are. But it is still, to me, a challenge replacing another challenge. So there's a movement, there's an evolution, there's something different now, and we need to address it. And this is how it relates with innovation and technology. And what I was saying in my introduction, I think we need to be, as regional planners, as companies, as municipalities, we need to be as innovative as we can to address this new context. And this is where it relates to organizational innovation and social enterprising and different kinds of organizations to welcome those incomers from a job perspective or from a region or a municipality perspective, and think out of the box. Now that we are into this, we're not going to change it. We're not going to push back the wave. It is coming. And to me, it is still a nicer challenge to be thinking of how do we welcome more people that want to establish their families here and stay here, than to other kinds of challenges like tourism related or so on. So it is a very interesting dynamic and time for us as people involved in regional development.
For sure. Thank you. And Denis, from the Faroe Islands perspective, I'm guessing you're looking at the same challenges, but maybe in a more holistic approach, because you've got the whole islands to think about.
Yeah. I just want to touch about this issue that Jean-Philippe mentioned with the COVID that has changed our mindset, because I think what's been happening for the last, watching at as a social scientist, what's been happening for the last maybe 5, 6, 7 years is that earlier we had this idea that our life should be about chasing jobs, moving for jobs and so on. But I think we see this trend here in the Faroes, but also maybe in Scandinavia in general, that people are more thinking about they have a life, and you have one lifetime, and you want to use that lifetime as good as possible, and maybe stay in places that are nice and peaceful and beautiful, and the landscape is important. And this COVID-19 situation with people forcing people to work from home has really opened some doors for those people that want to try to work from home, or try to work from other places and work from as a distant worker via the internet and so on. So that's I think is really a really exciting opportunity for people, for places that are really have this landscape attraction that the four of us have. So I think that, as Jean-Philippe mentioned, that I think we are going to a really exciting future in that manner. Yeah.
Absolutely, thank you. And as organizations, how do we innovate to enable those young people to connect to the rest of the world? Denis, I'm going to stick with you on that one, because I kind of get the impression that you've probably got several different organizational ways of tackling this. But it seems to me that you don't already have fixed structures, like say we might do in Scotland. So what's your approach at the moment as an organization? How free do you feel to change?
I'm not sure where you're heading with this one.
It's about how, I guess, we're looking at balancing our housing stock. We're looking at balancing the economic opportunities. We're looking at balancing tourism and almost engineering an economy. How important is it for us as organizations to be innovative as well as individuals? Yeah.
I think this part of innovation is so it's important because one thing that really that these rural communities that have typically been based on nature economy, fisheries, farming, and so on, they are typically really conservative. So what we have been working with here in locally on Suri for the last 8 years or something like that is to change this mindset that you don't have to be conservative. You don't have to do the same thing that you always have done. It's okay to change. So that task is really difficult to lift, because a large part of the people that's living on this island, they have been living on fisheries for most of their lives, and now they're going to live off something else. They're going to live off the landscape, of tourists, of experience economy, and so on. And it's really difficult to understand that. So this discussion of local discussion of innovation and what it means to walk on new paths is really important, and you really need an organization to do that. Somebody to push it, somebody to talk it, and somebody to sell it to the local population. And that's really an important task, I think, we have seen here locally, to get people to understand where we're heading.
Sure, no, thank you for that. Murray, any thoughts from, I suppose, because you deal with an awful lot of stakeholder organizations as well as your own?
Yes, I think two things I would say about sorry. Two things I would say about innovation are, we think it's been a real advantage to us not to own the land, because that leaves us much, we're much lighter on our feet, and we're not bogged down with all of the responsibilities that come from owning land. And we're then able to use our money and our staff resource and our political influence to help the people that own the land do creative things. So we think that's a real advantage. And I think the other thing is, and it's maybe slightly strange saying this when we've got a panel dominated by 4 men, but we think it's also really important that the area is managed in a way that's very, very inclusive. So we're constantly trying to engage with people who are not likely to be included. So we try and go to places and talk to people about change and bring them into the conversation, whether it's young people or people who don't have as much money or people from different ethnic minorities, etc. It's something I think we constantly have to strive for.
Absolutely. Jean-Philippe?
Yeah, if I may, I think I'm listening to you too, and lots of ideas are just coming in. I think it's quite obvious that we are in an era of new needs. And probably that COVID just brought two things. First, in terms of how do we live as a society, as a worker, as a family, it was the proof that remote work works. So that's that's done. And secondly, because of the lockdowns and so on, I think we spent a lot of times within our own family cells, and that probably increased the need or the importance of those necessary conciliation in between work and family. And I have two examples in the last 24 hours. I've just had a conversation with somebody working here, said that her boyfriend just was in touch with people leaving very well-paid jobs to go to another organization where that conciliation was higher. And right this morning, my sister just left a good paid job. I hope her boss is not listening to that panel, but for an organization with a cause. So that's important. You were talking about organizational innovation. I think we are in an era of new needs, and that salary and stuff is not as prime objective as before. Mm-hmm. And working for an organization with a purpose that does something, Murray, you were talking about involving the people, the incomers in the regional planning and so on, working for an organization that has something to say about how we manage the place, working for something greater than just a company profit mindset and so on. That's about innovation. And this is where social enterprising comes in. And I think that those new incomers, they will be looking for innovative organizations, innovative place to stay and to work from a different angle of view, from a different set of criteria, where you will have the organizational culture, the purpose, the quality of leadership, and all those things being prime objectives on maybe more classic salary conditions and so on. And the quality of the place and the landscape and all of those things in terms of family living and is well-being is now much more important. So I really think we're in an era of new needs, and we need to address that this way.
Definitely. And I think also we can think beyond just a single organization job as well. I think portfolio working is going to be a huge thing, where you're not necessarily wedded to this one organization and the one salary. And it may be that you look at several jobs. Murray.
Yeah, I think the other thing that the COVID period has shown us is, managing these landscapes, it always requires a great number of different stakeholders and players to work well together. And we've been trying to orchestrate that for quite a few years now, but we have never seen such good collaboration as we have seen in the last year, because people have realized, oh, this is important. We need to work together, and we can't just keep working in our individual silos, doing our individual roles. So we're very hopeful that that will continue into the future.
And here's a bit of a killer question for you all then. Should us, and I'm using it this metaphorically, I guess, but should we as expert organizations in our roles, is it us who should be deciding what's acceptable in a landscape and what's acceptable for our local communities? How important is this local community voice, and how do we get it? Jean-Philippe.
Well, if you're asking me first, as a biosphere reserve founder and manager, I am a lot for the bottom-up approach. This is how biosphere reserves are. So I would stay right there. That for me, and the way we are dealing with our challenges, yeah, local people comes very early in the process, and there's a whole complexity into managing so many voices. But there's something to have in mind, is that as we were saying, the sense of place comes, of course, with a certain care. If you belong to somewhere, you will have that care, and then care comes with interests, and sometimes interest comes with competition between interests. So allowing those voices to be heard is as well accepting a wide diversity of vision of the world. And with new incomers, we're talking about this, people coming in and we have something precious. Let's say in the room there's a very precious vase, and people are coming in and we're like, no, you can't do this, you can't say this, because you might break that. And so there's all this dynamic that again, we need to be innovative. Biosphere reserve is a way to address that. It's a very performant in many biosphere reserve ways to address how do we hear local people, and how do we include the local needs into the regional plannings and so on. But without going into details, this is for me a winning approach to find a way, even if it's tough, and it's much faster to go just with some key top leaders or elected officers and just go straight fast. But it is a winning approach on the long run to take the time and the effort to include the local voices.
Great, thank you. Denis, from your point of view?
Yeah, I think we are very much similar to Jean-Philippe, because most of our projects for the last 50 years here locally involved have been involving the local community. So we are really a bottom-up community. I think we don't have any similar communities like that in the Faroe. So all the projects that we're working on, the local development, they involve a wide range of people locally that can be involved in all from the difficult planning type to doing just coffee. So we are really a wide town with a wide organizational platform that people can involve in the local projects. And this is really important, because instead of just buying somebody in to do a local development project and say we should do that and that and that, then we get people to get ownership. And if we get one family to get ownership, one house to get ownership, then maybe we get a whole neighborhood. And if we get several houses, then within a short period of time, we have a large part of the community here that just get an ownership of the projects. So I think we really have been really important part of our development walk for the last 10 years to build upon our history of the community being involved in our local projects. So I think that's really important.
Great, thank you. And Murray, your thoughts?
Yes, very similar. I think we would think of it in terms of needing top-down processes to meet bottom-up processes, if I can use my hands that way. So we're trying to, we are a government agency and our funding comes from central government, but we're certainly trying to use those resources well to encourage the people who live in the park and encourage the visitors and encourage the land managers to do the right thing for the park. And we try and orchestrate that in a number of different ways. I talked about the governance system for the board, and that was very much about getting local people to sit on our management board. And the people who get elected into those positions typically are someone who's worked as a doctor, or worked in a bank, or worked in a vet, or worked in a supermarket, and knows a lot of people. They maybe don't know much about managing a protected area, but they know a lot of people and are respected locally, and that's what gets them onto our board, and that's very advantageous. We did a mapping exercise recently looking at all the different assets in the national park that were owned and managed by communities, and there's probably about 90 to 100 different assets that we've now got on our map that are village halls or community owned land or forests. And we certainly want to grow that range of assets in the future, because we do think that's the way forward.
Well, this has been fascinating and absolutely brilliant. Thank you all so much for your time. But before we go, I'm just going to ask for one sum up comment from each of you, and I haven't primed you on this one, so it's going to be a spontaneous thing. I want each of you to just sum up why you think your place is special. What is this sense of place, but for you personally, not your strapline, not that's on a company brochure. What matters to you about where you are? Denis, go.
Oh, difficult one. I think it's all about this belonging to a place. This place when you meet people on the street, and then you know everybody here. It's a small community, know everybody here. It's really a short distance into people's heart and soul while you're living in the most beautiful place in the world. So that's really what's in it for me. That I'm staying at a place that where people are really close to each other, and we are really close to nature also. So that's really important for me. Yeah.
Thank you, Denis. Murray.
Yeah, I was lucky. I grew up very close to the national park, and I can remember my teenage years when you separate from your parents and you're going on your first adventures, and many of them were in the area. And now I have two daughters, and it's great to see them at an age where they're going into the park and camping and hiking and starting to go up hills on their own. And I think that continuity of memories really helps connect you to the place.
Brilliant. And Jean-Philippe, to finish off.
Thank you. Hard to speak last. I would say for myself, it's freedom within space. By the way, I don't come from this place. I come from a big city, and I moved here, and I got attached to the place, and I developed that root feeling. And so where I come from, there are fences everywhere, private stuff everywhere, and here you have freedom within space. And what I found here as well, that I'm sure we can find in your own areas, is not only geographic space, but space for ideas, space to undertake something that was at my image. And this is why my idea became a project, became an organization, and became something I hope so is relevant and has a voice for that territory. So it's freedom within geographic and idea space.
Heart, soul, space, connecting. Thank you, everybody, and thanks for listening.
Thanks to you.